So how did you get started as an artist?
Well, I started very early because my parents were both artists, and they encouraged us to draw, me and my three brothers. And early on, I drew strange drawings very similar to the ones I do now. I mean, images. My early drawings were of people coming out of bodies with staircases and lots of toes and lots of fingers. And I continued to do art sort of as a survival thing, a lot of stuff happened, and it was how I focused my energy. So I think from a very early age, I knew I was an artist. And I graduated from Lowell High School in June of '66, and lived in the Haight at the time. I was doing posters for Bill Graham at this point. And I was introduced to him by some members of the Committee Theater. Whatever, a stand-up comedy, whatever. And Bill liked my work, and he introduced me to Wes Wilson, who sort of showed me how to put a poster together. And so that was the beginning of that. And I had already done a couple posters at that time. I got a scholarship to the Academy of Arts in 1965 for a summer scholarship. And I remember loving it, but it was 8 classes. You had to do all that. And afterwards, I had no interest in going to school. And I ended up moving off to New Mexico for 5 years. And I've always done art, but a lot of it is like how I comfort myself. I was doing benefit posters as my gift to the community, and so I did the Haight Free Clinic and the Mind Truth and some other things.
So how many posters did you do for the committee? I'm curious about that.
I think
2, 3? Like
more than that.
More than that?
Yeah. I did drawings of them too.
Mm-hmm. And so you were part of the scene that was already established in North Beach.
Yes.
Before the Haight, before the counterculture thing happened here at a young age, which I think is unusual. And I've said to you before, I think that your work is easily as distinctive as any of the other artists that came out of the Haight, whether it be Wes or Victor or Mouse and Kelly, Rick Griffin, just an incredible style. And I think knowing that you had started before like the ballroom scene, that you were well on your way, and you didn't join this to accommodate that or meet the expectations that might have been established.
Right.
And at such like a young age compared to the rest of the artists in the scene.
I was on picket lines when I was 14, and that was my community.
Yeah.
And the parties after the picket lines, this was for civil rights and Automobile Row, which was the car dealers back in '64 probably. And I think I met the committee through them too. I mean, they were connected.
Sure.
And that experience has stayed with me. I mean, yesterday was Juneteenth, which is Emancipation Proclamation Day. But all the strange stuff is going on in the world, so, oh well.
Yeah.
I think your work is still very relevant today as it was back in the 60s, which...
I may not have known it was relevant back then, of course.
Absolutely. The most recent work of yours that I've seen, and I don't know when you did the original drawing, but that is so relevant today. Do fish need umbrellas?
Yeah.
Yes, they do, because we're acidifying the ocean.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, that's an old drawing, actually. I was confused about how to get the right thing for the web, right? Because I don't do anything. I don't even have a cell phone. So I'm a difficult person to work with in some ways. You know, I tell people I'm not low tech, I am basically no tech. And I tell people I'm a conscientious objector.
Hallelujah the Pill, which is one of my favorites. But in all your work, the male and the female forms are equal. They really are, and that's quite unusual, I think, particularly for, you know, in some ways, you would expect in the mid-'60s, the counterculture was about movements, and there was equality, there was civil rights, and there was women's rights, and there was, you know, this time when everybody had this awareness about equality, but it wasn't really prominent in most of the artwork. I mean, the posters that came out of the Haight were primarily by men, and they had stylized, idealized women forms. But yours are very, very, very compatible and equal and powerful.
Thank you.
And
it
has to be just thinking about having been there when we were all about movement and equality and rights, but we weren't really ready to really believe it or manifest it as your art did, I think, which is remarkable. It's one thing I really like about your work.
And it's like when I would talk about your work in my class, you're like a subculture to the subculture. Like Wes Wilson and Kelly and Mouse were a subculture in their, you know, those posters during that time period was a subculture, and she was a subculture to that. Like you,
very distinct.
Very like while they claim to be all these, like Peter's saying, you're claiming to be, you know, against the man and feminist and all these things. Like the raw, real version of that was Mari Tepper and her work. She's anti-commercial, which is what the rest of the posters claim to be. But in my opinion,
I think they were doing the best they could, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a profound change that people were kind of, you know, becoming aware of or grappling for.
It's a personal opinion, but I think you draw people as people, and particularly women as women and not as objects, or not as some idealized avatar type of
perfect. In fact, I go backwards the other way. With women in a higher position, now that we have Me Too.
So what was it like working as an artist at such a young age during the counterculture within San Francisco and the Haight specifically?
I don't think I thought much about it other than I knew that I was doing interesting things. I was doing commissioned things. And it felt really good, but I did not have a sense of a career or something, really.
Got it.
You know. You want to see me draw?
Oh yes.
Different thing. This is drawing with 2 pens. But, okay.
Wow, that's great.
You do 3 pens too, actually. So I'm not as good as I used to be. I probably could sharpen up some. I could do more. And then I can do things like this.
It's amazing.
You could put it in the mirror and read it.
Yeah. Mirror.
And you can look at it from any angle, and it still makes sense, and it's art.
I challenged myself about a lot of things that had to do with dexterity. I used the Chinese healing balls, if anybody knows the silver healing balls, and I got so good I could do 2 sets at once, turning them. Wow. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Wait, will you move them
I've
between your
seen them.
fingers?
Yeah.
Chinese metal balls for, for for strength and dexterity. But it's very cool to be able to do two at once and stand on my head. So would you like another drawing or?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. That's right.
Love this stuff. Let's see what lines we have here. That one's good. Some heavier. Okay. I have to remind myself sometimes of what I'm doing. That's not surprising. Sometimes they overlap and I get lost.
Oh, cool. See it?
Oh, yes.
In conversation. Still.
Bonded.
And
That's fabulous.
it could also be two people, but you could also see other images in it.
Absolutely.
Um,
Like Rochart.
How do you usually start a drawing? Like if you were to make a poster.
I do it kind of fluidly, you know. But I've had deadlines, and sometimes that's very difficult. A lot of the posters I did early on, I did over a weekend or something. And to me, they aren't quite perfect, you know. But, you know, I was able to do that, you know. I would start out with the size of the poster and know that there should be lettering that, you know, was readable, even though it was difficult. And I just kind of worked fluidly. I don't look at drawings and try to, you know, copy them. I get a lot of enjoyment out of
Making something new.
yeah. But I think the best stuff I do is just what did I say?
The best stuff you do. Face.
I could go on
Yeah, you could
endlessly.
go
I do
on.
this on
I wouldn't
walls
complain.
everywhere I've ever lived. You know, I have walls that I just drew and painted into, and you can look at it upside down, you know. I never was really impressed with the celebrity kind of, you know, what? Image and
You didn't see yourself as a brand?
absolutely not. Though I do see my stuff in a lot of people's work.
Yeah.
As long as I get paid, it's okay.
Earlier you said something that struck me, and that you were very young. You were younger than most of the other artists that were working. That it wasn't really a career so much as just it was a very pure pursuit that you were on, I think. And again, why it stands out to me what you created. Now, I think that, and I've been lucky to know many of these artists pretty well, and they weren't in it as a career so much, but they were more seasoned and more practical, and they were thinking about becoming well-known from a career perspective, if that makes sense. They weren't here to become a brand, but it was okay that they were. they had the joint show back in '66 or something like that. And that was very aggressive. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you, on the other hand, were just doing what you were meant to do.
Yeah.
And happened to intersect with this movement that was going on.
I think it's happening in a big way, in proportion to how things used to come to me.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes overwhelmed because I'll be 70 in a couple months, and I feel like there's only a certain amount of excitement that I could take because as an artist, I'm very reclusive. And never in my life have I figured out how to get paid or how to ask, That's part of why I did posters for, because it was easier to contribute art.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that those posters were going to become collector's items. I mean, I knew all the early people in the Haight, basically, psychedelic shop, print mint. Those were my first two.
It started outside of the artist circle, and I've learned a lot about it. I was just at first just a fan, and then got into the kind of the music side of it. But the thing that is fascinating to me is that from '65 to '68, which are kind of the heyday of the vintage, they didn't even put the year on the poster. It was meant to be for 2 days, and it was it's a poster. It goes up, and it's not valuable at all. And the promoters early on said, well, this can be very valuable, because they started reprinting and selling them across the country. I think outside the awareness, and certainly outside the benefit of the artists that created the art, that was the start of the very kind of unfortunate imbalance in that world.
Yeah.
There was a lot of money being made, and the artists never saw a nickel of it.
And they still don't.
Yeah. That is going to be a long time before it changes.
And then, it's really criminal that I've seen lady artists who are not paid for their work but told, come to my show and you can sell some of your posters there, and they're expected to take. And these are ladies that I've worked with and who have done work for my company, and I'm horrified when I hear the stories. And it's so, what you experienced continues to this day, and that's wrong.
Well, I wasn't a very tolerant person in some ways back then. The make love movement, that's when I became a serious feminist. I just didn't understand why there was all this sex, and supposedly it was, what?
Well, you said earlier recently we were talking about back to the counterculture and women's rights and equality, and I think you had said that the first manifestation was it was free love. I mean, that's what got the men behind the idea, and it was kind of before anyone was really ready to fully understand it. I think.
Yeah.
It was those initial steps, which were, sex, drug, and rock and roll, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
Which brings one to your work, Hallelujah, the pill.
Mm-hmm.
That's my birth control pills at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I did hundreds of drawings of these figures, and I have drawing pads that are just filled with people making love in all these positions.
Are they all heterosexual?
No, they're androgynous.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody asks, see what you see, be what you're gonna be. This was the first piece of art that I had 5-color printing on. Mm-hmm. This is back at Tila Litho, which was a great, it was a great printer.
We had another piece from Tila Trek. It was that one color.
No,
bindweed. No, this was not bindweed, but the same.
Trek was
and God grows his own.
Yeah.
Now, I think this poster was initially smaller, because I don't generally
Yeah, I think
work
this. I think
big.
this is a reprint.
And
Really?
I always get a little confused about my images that have been changed, and people are buying them thinking they are,
Your original.
yes.
Oh, it's terrible.
What is the word for something where no matter what angle you look at it, you can appreciate it?
A paradigm.
Is it paradigm?
Mm-hmm.
That's my father's business was called Paradigm. And he's the one that taught me. I asked him when I was about 10, how to know when a piece of art was done. And he was an industrial designer. And he said to me, if it works on all four sides, then it's perfect. So that word paradigm, I like it.
This portrait was from your father.
Yeah,
yes?
my father did this portrait of me about 15, 20 years ago. I don't know how old I was. But I sat for it. And it's not a real happy picture, but it really looks a lot like me, I think.
Yeah, I think it does.
I'd love to see a coffee table book
Oh, yeah.
called In a Paradigm of Her Own.
I like that. That's very good.
What's the obsession with multiple fingers and multiple toes?
I remember being told by my mother that you could do what, you know, when you're drawing and you're doing something that might be people or animals or something, that you can draw whatever you want in terms of how many toes and how many fingers, and they started coming out of everything. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff, you know, I was probably on psilocybin or something at that time. I have so many drawings, you know, I mean, and a lot of them have been, you know, published, printed, whatever. I've illustrated some books. So, another time. This was for the 4th of July,
Which is coming up.
and it was at the Straight Theater.
The
Right?
straight, yeah. This is a great poster.
I love it. Now, I love it on the side like this, Peter, where that's a face.
This way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's his kind of hair. If you can, just the shape, and
Shape of the
I
head.
squint my eyes. I like the fact that I can make it, I can draw a little bit and you would see all that. Because I always try to find, there is a right side up mostly. You know, it just happens that it gets worked this way. Yeah, lots of fingers and toes.
Yes.
And lots of ankles and nose.
I love that you have, you know, little faces appear
Yeah.
on a
That's
kneecap.
a lot
or,
of work.
I think I try to put faces anywhere I could
Yeah.
because I like to have people around me, surround myself with. I have some of my drawings from like 4 or 5, and I would like to show them to somebody at some point because they're just, you know, they look very much like what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
I think my parents did the right thing by encouraging us to, you know, explore. And
And your brothers, did they do art as well?
one of them is a poet, and one of them was a politician, and the other one is a philosopher, and I'm the painter. I think I brought a picture of the 4 of us back in the 70s. The 4 Ps. That's me and my brother Orpheus.
Orpheus?
Yes. Orpheus and Vladimir, the identical twins. They changed their names when they went to Europe with my mother. That's 74.
Wow.
See the boots?
Yeah.
I still have those Tibetan boots. I put things in storage because I was homeless on and off, and after 35 years I got some of my stuff back, and some of it looked good, you know? Pair of shoes, you know. And this one, can I show? Yeah. Where's the top and where's the bottom? That's the top-ish. Thank you. This is a drawing I did in 78, I guess, for the Bay Times about diversity. And initially, it was too controversial for them, even though they commissioned me to do it. But later, in 1990, it was in the Bay Times. So it says, issues of human rights are everybody's business. One struggle. Stop being sad, start getting mad. And again, this is very relevant, I think.
Absolutely.
I mean, the stuff going on with kids just... So this will be a picket sign for the marches.
Mari Bianca, 1978.
40 years ago.
And you learned how to put your name on it and put a little
My
copyright.
father told me to do that always.
Yeah.
But I added and changed my name so much. Bianca was my middle name. For a while, I didn't like my father's, so I stopped using Tepper. But I also went on to Mari Calamari and Bianca Tijuana and Lazora Roja, which is a character in one of my books, Lazora Roja. And her, and Myrtle and Pearly, these are all characters.
And you don't just make posters and illustrations, you do painting and also
Sculptural stuff.
Sculpture stuff.
And you work with bread.
I worked with bread because I lived in the backwoods and this man would not let me put wood in the stove unless I was cooking. He was not very nice to me and I was always cold. So I started baking art. And I'm in a book called Native Funk and Flash with the bread art, which is really nice.
This would make a gorgeous political
It's
poster.
fabulous.
Yeah. It's being put on the boards right now.
Mm.
It will be out there.
Yeah, there are all these marches coming up, you know, and I think it's, you know, strong. As a small drawing, it's very nice. But this works this size.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's the drag queen, transgender, and the dyke, and the disabled, and
I knew you were on the board for the Common Persons of San Francisco, correct?
I was appointed to a city advisory board, the Mental Health Advisory Board.
Okay.
In '86, and I served a couple of terms, and I represented disenfranchised people and with mental health. So I was in a position where I made sure that the programs that had money for mental health were, you know, treating their clients right. So it was a review every year, and it wasn't always a good review. But that was really a nice period of time. You know, I had been on smaller advisory boards, and then when I got appointed to this one, I felt like I could speak at City Hall and speak from my heart because I wasn't getting paid. You know. Anyhow, there's always been political stuff happening.
But yeah, you're not just a poster artist, you're heavily involved in the community. That's like the thing that's important to you at the beginning.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah. It started with the picket lines, you know, and the songs, and I mean, I think this drawing could have been good back then too.
There may be a young Marie or Mari,
Mari,
or a young boy watching this and seeing your art. What would you say to them?
I'd say diversity, yay.